All right, this video is a week late probably by the time I get this up and edited, but better late than never, right? So I am here to share my bridal BYOP. I had talked last month about doing one for this season. I think it's a good time to do this, and with the holiday and everything else, life, it just didn't happen. So thanks to all of you for being patient and waiting for this to go up. So I'm about to share all of the shades that would be in a combination of what I would want in my own bridal palette and the type of bridal palette that I would use on most of my clients. So we're about to dive into this, but if we haven't met before, my name is Kelly and I'm a professional hair and makeup artist, and here on my channel I strive to keep beauty real. Real honest, real relatable, and real fun. So if that sounds like something you'd enjoy, don't forget to click subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on future videos, including my next one that will be, I'm going to be doing it in combination with this video, it will be tips for wedding day makeup. And that's honestly going to be whether you are in a wedding or whether you are just going to a wedding. It's just going to be some fun tips and tricks, so make sure you're subscribed so you see that one. Now, if you are new to this series, this was created to really help us get use out of our single eyeshadows. You know, I know there was a time where myself especially, but I think a lot of people were buying a lot of single shadows to curate their own collections, and those collections just kept getting like larger and larger, and we'd get the things in the mail, we'd swatch them, we'd ooh and ah, and then they'd just kind of sit there. So this was really meant to spur creativity and really help us use the makeup we have. So I hope that you have all enjoyed this. Now, this has been an open collab, so for fellow makeup lovers, fellow content creators who want to jump in, you can feel free. If you see this and you want to do a bridal palette for this month, you can do so. Now, normally this is the portion of the video where I say, and wait till the end of the video and I will be sharing what next month's theme is. But honestly, I believe that I'm just going to take a pause through the summer. I have honestly been so crazy busy, and I know this upcoming month I'm traveling a lot, and because I have been so busy, I've been getting about one long form piece of content up a week, and right now I just don't want to do that for a BYOP. And I feel like a lot of us have been sticking more and using palettes that we have. If you've been still using your singles all the time, let me know, but I know that I've been reaching a bit more for palettes again. So I just need to take a breather, and I have never missed a BYOP in this series of 2+ years. And I feel like it's time to like take a rest. So I'm going to take a rest through the summer, reevaluate, see what the vibe is, and we'll see what comes for fall. But if you want to do a bridal palette or any other palette, or you're like, Kelly, no, I really want you to do this type of palette, let me know. Okay, wow. So let's go ahead and dive in. Again, this is a palette that I would like for myself if I were getting married, but also one that I think anyone could wear to a wedding, anyone who's in a wedding, like anything. It's just a pretty generalized, nice palette. So here we go. I originally thought I was going to do 9 shades, but I just cannot, y'all. I cannot just do 9 shades. So here is my little palette. And I'm going to dive into all of the reasons why I chose these shades, if they are still available. I'll have all of the shades linked down below. I did try to pick shades that I thought were still available, so you should be able to pick any of these up if it so suits your fancy. But honestly, I feel like most of these shades, if you already have quite a few singles, you probably have something similar in your collection. All right, so, oh, and here I'm saying that I tried to use shades that I thought you could still get, and I know this first one you absolutely cannot get anymore. But anyway, let's go ahead and zoom in. I am just going to be doing one look for today's video, which means I definitely won't be using all these shades, but we'll kind of get the vibe. All right, let's get started. All right, first of all, I did not realize how red my eyes were when I did the intro of this, so sorry about that. Put some eye drops in, but I'm sure you guys are used to my scary red eyes. Also, can I just say, when I first started doing like makeup, skincare content here on my channel, I never would have thought that I would just like sit for long periods of time with absolutely no makeup on in front of the camera and just share that. Because I was like, oh, maybe I should do my eye look first and then go through and do like show the shadows and everything, and I just never care anymore. Like, this is my face. There's absolutely nothing wrong with a naked face and showing the skin that you have. So it's just so funny, the evolution. I think some of that comes with age, but like the evolution of like, you know what, like we're just keeping it all real here. You know, that's how I roll. Anyway, that's sort of like a side tangent. I'm just like looking at myself. I'm like, meh, do I care? Not so much. All right, we're going to get started, and I'm using my lovely palette pickup tool from Devinah. So this first shade, I just pulled this out because I think that this is like the epitome of a beautiful inner corner for a day where you're going to be getting a ton of pictures taken. This is the one that I know for sure you can't get anymore because the brand is no longer in business. Can anybody who who's been around the block with singles, does anybody know what this is? This is Shimma Shimma from Makeup Geek. And this truly is a beautiful satin shimmer. It is just so flattering. I really think one of the things for me is, while I love a fun, beautiful, shimmery pop on the inner corner in my everyday, I just tend to stick when I'm going to be having a photo done that needs to have longevity. I want it to have a little bit more of a classic look and be the most flattering it can possibly be. And I think that, like, rather than like a bright, blingy inner corner, I just like something that's going to be a bit soft. I don't know if you can see that, but it's absolutely wonderful. I was doing so much swatching trying to pick out the perfect deeper tones for this palette that my fingers are a little bit stained, so finger swatches probably won't be super helpful. But I'm sure that most of us have a somewhat satiny, cream colored, or like 2 clicks lighter than your skin tone type shade to wear as an inner corner, and that's really what I would love. Now, if I had made this a bigger palette, I will say that I personally would probably have 2 of these, one that's more like neutral and one that is a little bit more pearlescent for those people who have a pinkier undertone, a cooler undertone, just so that it doesn't look off, because it really is just like you but better. That's personally my vibe for most like wedding day or bridal party makeup. If you're a guest, you can sort of like get away with something maybe a little bit more fun. Oh, and by the way, I just also want to say, wear whatever you want. If you want to wear bright blue eyeshadow with like a red winged eyeliner, whatever, if that's your vibe, go for it. This is my video and my palette, so that's what I'm doing. Okay, so this next shade, I tried, again, if you can see in here, I tried to have a few different undertones in here. So we have some more like neutral or leaning into warm. We also have a few olives and a few on the more like pinky side. And that really was to envelop not just all skin tones, but shades that flatter all eye colors. And I'll get into that as we kind of like dip into some of these. So this is Camel. This is from Sydney Grace. And this is a really beautiful shade. It is just truly one of those that it's like, oh, as I like hit my little pan puller, this could work on most neutral to warm skin. It is going to come up a little bit more warm or into almost like a khaki, not quite compared to this next shade that we're going to be using, but I would think that this could work on just about anybody. Or if somebody with cooler tones wanted to have a little bit more of like a warm look on their eye, this would actually be nice. And I know that these first 3 are very soft and very light. We're going to be like building on this so that you have options if you want to go deeper. Okay, this next one is one of my favorites. This is Kalon or Kalon from Devinah. I would think it would be Kalon. This is a beautiful neutral that leans into olive. This definitely has that more olive undertone. I do also want to make mention that I do have a discount code with Devinah, so you could always use KEEPBEAUTYREAL to save on your shades. I don't think that the pan puller that I'm using today, I think that that is still excluded, but you could always give it a try. You never know. So you can see here how this has this slight olivey tone. It is so pretty. And I will say, if I were to incorporate color into a bridal look, there are 2 options that I would go into. And one is more of like the pinky burgundy, but not like too pink. The other would be almost more into like the olivey greens, sort of those like earthy greens, because again, I think that those are still 2 classic colors. So if you like something that's a little bit more colorful. Okay. Oh my gosh, I need to grab a makeup wipe. Side note, I don't know why, but today I am having such a hard time with my Invisalign. I just feel like I'm extra lispy. I don't know what it is, but I have one more tray, y'all. I have one more tray, and unless like the ortho just forces me to do more trays, I'm pretty sure we're done because we've already added on some trays and I'm feeling pretty good about the progress. So woohoo, almost graduation time. I'm excited. All right, so while I tend to not do overly metallic, overly shimmery shades on the lid, I still want some sparkle. I just tend to stay away from the uber sparkly, like micro spark glittery shades for a couple of reasons. Sometimes in photos that can pick up a little wonky. And also by the end of a long day, even with a glitter glue, you run the chance of having like sparkles like coming down. So I just like to try to avoid that. But this shade, it is quite like luminous and looks beautiful and wet on the skin, but I think that the finish of it is just so pretty. This is Erratic, and this is one of my, honestly, I mean, I'm probably going to say this a lot, but this is honestly one of my favorite, I would say, like everyday shimmers from Devinah. This is so pretty. If you like the shade Moonlit, but you want something that is a bit more, this is almost like it's warmer for sure. Moonlit is definitely a little bit on the cooler side, but it's still not so warm that it's gold. So I really love this shade, and I knew it was one that I would have to put in here. And I think that, you know, if you chose to go through and use a dry or just a very lightly damp brush versus a wet brush, you could get a nice softer, maybe you can see here. And again, I'm sorry that my fingertips are a little bit stained, but you could get a little bit softer feel. It doesn't have to be that like, ba-bam, like very foiled look, but you also could do that if that is your jam. Now, I haven't really given full, complete thought to what my makeup would be like on my wedding day, but there's a really strong chance that this might be the color that I would do on my lid. This is from Sydney Grace, and this is the shade Blush, and I just absolutely love this one. You know that I am a rose gold fan, and this to me is the neutral side of rose gold. It isn't overly into a warm rose gold. It isn't into a pinky rose gold. It's sort of like a nude and rose gold had a baby. And I just think that this is so pretty. And I think it would also look really pretty on blue eyes. So really enjoy that one. Like you can see here, Erratic leans almost into like the olivey neutral. This one is more of your like pinky neutral. Now, I wanted to have a deeper shimmer. I think that this could be really pretty for an outer lid, depending on your eye shape, if you want to have a bit more depth. And this one is just, it's so pretty. Again, it's another one of my favorite shimmers from Devinah that is in more of that like classic formula. This is the shade Voodoo. And this might look like some of these pans, you might be like, oh, you don't really have that much of a dip. Listen, a dip like this in a pan of someone who owns many, many, many eyeshadows is a lot. And I will say also, the blushed shade that I just showed from Sydney Grace, I actually have 2 of those because it is one of the ones in Mel's bundle, I believe it is, and I bought that whole bundle, and so I have it in that palette that I keep all together, and then I also have a loose one as well, so I have 2 that I work through. Okay, so Voodoo is this beautiful, I like to say like a Dutch cocoa brown, and it has this tiny micro fleck, no, not micro fleck, micro glow. We're gonna go with micro glow, that's not really a word, but if you can see, it has almost like a, come on and focus here. It has a bit of like a rosy glow to it. Can you see that? It is just so pretty, and it makes a beautiful, it's a shimmer leaning satin, and I think that that can be super flattering if you want like a luminous lash line that would be really pretty on the lower lash line, because it's not so glowy that it's going to emphasize wrinkles, and I feel like this little bit of glow would actually almost like diffuse under eye creases a little bit, and again, it would be beautiful in the outer corner for just a bit of dimension. Or if you're going gangbusters and you're doing like nighttime wedding, you're doing like a sexy smoky eye, that would be really pretty too. All right, this next one, I wanted a shade that is in more of that like burgundy, but a little bit warmer burgundy, like a red purple based brown. And this one, I don't think you can get this one. I think I actually did get this in a mystery bag from Sydney Grace, but this is Lords of Leaping. And some of these, you know, some of these I think that you all probably have if you've done a lot of the mystery bags like I have. So this is just such a pretty shade. Again, this would look beautiful, I think, on both blue and green eyes. Very pretty. We're going to do a pinky swatch, so it's going to look pathetic next to that big juicy one that I did of Voodoo. And all of these, I would say, are, you know, the color is not like in your face color. They're a bit desaturated is a little extreme, but you know, just a little bit softer. And that is just so pretty. Like I could see that if you just used a bit, like here, if you just use that small amount and like threw that into your crease, but kept it light, but had that little bit of that color to it, it can be so pretty, so pretty. All right, I do think that that slightly rosy look is very bridal. It's somewhat classic, and I wanted to give a nod to that. This shade I think works well because it's not overly pink. This is Passion from Devinah, and this is, it's almost a warm rosy shade. And so I think that, you know, this can kind of tip into both sides of the spectrum. It's not overly pink, and it's not going to be like bubblegum, cotton candy. Can I also say, so I wanted to wear something white to just kind of like give that little bit of a bridal vibe, but wearing white when you are swatching eyeshadows is just like so scary. Like when you're putting on makeup or anything like that, it's like, oh, please, goodness. And I'm drinking iced coffee, and I was like, don't spill on yourself, don't spill. So anyway, here's Passion. You'll also see as we go through here, I did try to have some light, medium, and deep shades for mattes. For me, you know, when you are in or when you're going to a wedding, you're taking photos, right? And so for me, it's all about that contouring of the eye and getting the most flattering eye makeup shape for your actual eye shape. And a lot of that comes in the contouring. And to get the best blend, you do want like some light, medium, and deep shades, no matter what colors you're really going with. And so that's something I always try to have in every palette, but especially a palette where I think about people, you know, having pictures taken. All right, this shade is Pandora, and I did want to have a couple shades on the very cool side for people. You know, you all know that that is not where I lean into, but I do know that there are people who would prefer to have a cooler toned eye look for, you know, their own wedding or to go to a wedding. That's just what they love. And I realized as I was starting to build this palette, I was like, I'm lacking that a little bit in here, but I personally find that I have enough in here that I could sort of get some of that. I mean, I would never just take a 12 pan. I would never only take 12 eyeshadow shades to do like a wedding party of clients, so I would probably have more options, but this is at least giving a little nod, and I think that this does go well with several of the other shades. All right, our deepest shade, this is Manic from Devinah, and this is that beautiful deep brown. I wanted something that wasn't overly cool. It also wasn't going to be like an overly warm brown. Again, you could have a beautiful, like rich, warm brown, but I wanted something that leaned, you know, a little bit more neutral. And the thing about this is I feel like if you do blur it out a lot, it can look cooler toned just because it gets a little bit of that like sooty feel, but not gray, like not gray. It's a beautiful shade. I really like that one. And then a couple more in a mid-tone, and we have a warm shade and then one that leans into cooler, almost khaki. So this is the shade Abundance, and I love this shade from Sydney Grace. This definitely is on the warmer side, and I just think for me that is just, it's very pretty. It's something that can be very flattering. I think that this is a color that just really has that like classic, goes with everything. I also think that this type of color really looks great because it almost has, it's like a little bit of like a red-orange undertone, and I think that looks great with green eyes. So I love a shade like this. It's super flattering. And our last one is the shade Relax from Sydney Grace. I think this is actually a pretty popular one. This almost leans into that like concrete, olivey brown. It is a beautiful, slightly cool, sorry, Relax, you're getting the pinky, but it does have a little bit of that like almost cool olive vibe to it. I think my camera shut off as I was swatching this one, but this is great for people who enjoy wearing cool tones, people that have olive, like a cool olive skin tone. I mean, you could pair this with the Erratic shade and it would be absolutely beautiful. Like even if you wanted like a little bit of some pink tone, you could use that as like the very outer edge of the transition, and that would be really pretty. So I have some flecks of color that are giving me anxiety here on my vanity, so I'm going to wipe that off along with myself. But here we have my bridal palette. I think that this encompasses a lot of different looks that people might want, and I cannot wait to create a look. I haven't decided where I'm going to go with this. You're probably not you're probably not surprised to hear that I'm probably going to use the shade Blush. But other than that, I have no idea. So let's get into a look and we can both be surprised together. All right, so first of all, to get started, I'm going to use an eye base. If we're talking about going to or being in a wedding, we're going to have a long day. So we're going to use this. This is the Prelusion base from Devinah. I'm just going to pop this on with a synthetic brush and I'll be right back. All right, per usual, I'm taking a bit of translucent setting powder and just throwing that through my crease. You all know that I like doing this just because it makes blending eyeshadow so much easier if you're working. Not that this base is tacky, because it's not, but any eye base usually gives a tiny bit of grip to the skin as opposed to slip, and I want the slips just so that I can get a nice beautiful blur. All right, so I am going to do my makeup the way that I have always felt the best and most confident, and that is actually working from the lid all the way up. And I think anytime I do this here on my channel, people are like, that's not the way all of the influencers do it or whatever. And you know, this is just the way that I've always liked it, because in that way I'm building the shape as I go and I can kind of like see the results as they're happening. However you like to do it, that is cool. So we are going to start with that blushed shade. I'm not going to use a glitter glue or anything like that. I really want to keep this fairly soft. I am going to wet my brush more so to just avoid fallout. So I don't really need it to be like a wet brush. I just need a little bit of something. I just think that this is just such a pretty, kind of goes with all the things shade, looks great on everyone. If you have really cool skin, this is going to look a little bit more gold on you, but not so much, not that like yellow gold. It's going to, you know, live a little bit more in like a natural gold. This is a pretty shade. It has some nice luminosity. It's pretty glowy, but it's not like overly metallic. It's not like one of those super thick metallics. I think the Sydney Grace formula is a bit on the thicker side. If you have a lot of lid texture, or you know, you're trying to get something that's a little bit more satiny, I love like things like the Viseart shadows. Those are beautiful. I could have pulled something out of any of my Viseart palettes and popped it in here too. There are tons of Viseart palettes that right off the bat are beautiful just to use for something like that. Even like the Sigma palettes, they have some beautiful shimmers as well. So for other brands that aren't necessarily like what we think of as single shadows, if you have some of those palettes in your collection, you could use those as well. All right, I think I'm gonna go into the warmer end of things. I really would like to use this Abundance shade just to pop on, because I do think that it like makes my eyes pop. So I am going to take a smallish crease brush and start with that. So I think I'm going to go through with the Larifay E13. This is a fairly dense brush, so it's going to help me lay down the shape that I want, and then I can grab something fluffier if I want to sort of blur it out more. And of course, I always start more towards the outside where I want that shade to be the darkest. And I know that I'm going to be pulling this up more, so I don't want to go up too much, because we're just laying the color right now, and then I can, once most of this is off the brush, I can take a bit of that at the edge and just pull it up and really soften that out. And I'm going about 2/3 of the way in here. Now, you know me, because of my eye shape, I do like to make this a bit more angled, and I usually wait until most of that color is off of my brush to then extend that a bit more and give it a bit of a, not like a wing, but a little bit more of an angled shape. And that way it just keeps it soft on the edge and it doesn't look like I laid tape down and just went like, whoa. All right, on a larger, fluffier brush, I'm going to take some of that Camel shade, and I'm just going to run that along the very edge. Oh my gosh, I don't know what's going on out there, but it's starting to get loud. So I'm also taking that Camel shade on the inner part of my crease. So I have always enjoyed doing my makeup this way, as opposed to laying down a transition shade everywhere, then adding shadows on top of that, and then adding shadows on top of that. It just ends up being a lot of shadow, and I feel like you take more time than you really need. And you know, when that started being like the trend, I was like, oh, okay, I guess we're doing this now. And I started doing that, you know, many years ago, whenever that was. And I've just never liked it as much. And you know how you get into these habits and all of a sudden you're like, do I even really like love this? Is this serving me? Is this serving me? If it's not, I'm going back to what works for me. So keep in mind, if there's anything that I say during any of my videos and you're like, no, I don't really believe in that. If you try it a couple times and you're like, it's not the vibe for me, that is cool. That is totally cool. And I almost always have to do a little bit of cleanup right here. There's just something, and I know it, so you'd think I should be more aware of it, but it's because I hold this hand a little lower. I think my blend gets a little bit lower, and that's not what I want with my downturned eyes. We want to keep like lifting everything up. I want this to be like a push-up bra for my face. All right, we have very minimal fallout, almost nothing. I am just going to take a little bit of concealer, if I can find it. I'm just going to take a little bit of concealer and pop this on the inner part and down into the lower area and blend that out a little bit. I have been enjoying recently laying down my concealer like after I do most of my eye makeup so that I'm not like putting a bunch of concealer down to just then put eyeshadow over it, and it wouldn't have mattered if there was eyeshadow there anyway. But because I am going to do a really soft inner corner, I want to make sure that this is fully covered, that I've got some of that like darkness tucked away into the secrets of underneath the makeup. I'm not going like heavy with my makeup today. Like that's just, I don't love that look on me. So no matter what, even for like event makeup, it's still gonna be fairly light. So we do what we can and just, you know, give ourselves some grace. All right, I am just very, very gently powdering literally just that little area where I had put on my concealer. I'm doing this just a little differently today because obviously I'm doing the other video with the rest of my tips and tricks for wedding makeup, along with some other things like eye focused. So make sure you check that out just for like all the deets on that. But now that I've got that set, I can go through and do my inner corner, and then we'll do the lash line as well. So for my inner corner, I'm going to take a fairly big brush that I can really like stamp this color in. This is the 207 from BK Beauty. And I am going to keep this up fairly high, and I'm just popping a little bit in. And then with my brush more cleaned off, I'm just blurring that out. Now, typically I do like to do my inner corner after my makeup has been done, but we're just doing this a little bit differently today. Okay, so for my lower lash line, I think I am going to use that Voodoo shade. I do like a darker lower lash line, so I think I'm going to throw a little bit of that on. Let's do that and see how we feel. I feel like I'm doing like my bridal trial makeup or something here. So I'm taking the 204 from BK Beauty, and we're just gonna smudge that. And again, if this gets a little out of control, I can always clean it up. That's the other nice thing about doing the rest of your makeup after you do your entire eye look. I don't have to worry about messing up a bunch of under eye concealer or whatever that I might have put on. All right, I'm not gonna lie. I do wish that I had taken a tinier brush, so I'm just going to clean up the very edge of this and then take a smudge brush and just like lighten it up a little bit. Yeah, okay, so now it's almost like a soft liner. I'm just gonna let that Bioderma dry before I smudge that back out. As I am waiting right now, this might look like my lower lash line is a lot darker than what my upper lashes will be, but you have to consider, I personally would be someone where on the day of a wedding, especially if I'm in the wedding, I'm going to want to wear a very light lash, like maybe just a few lashes on the outer corner or like a lightweight full lash, something like that. Nothing like overly dramatic, but I definitely would have a lot of mascara on too. So that's going to balance that out just by having, you know, the other makeup on your upper lashes. When you don't have anything on your lashes, it starts to look a little bit like too much, but it won't be once we get the mascara and lashes on, which I'm not doing today. All right, the other thing that I would absolutely do is do some tight lining, just to really give, again, the thickest lash look possible. I'm not going to line my waterline on the lower lash line though, because I don't want that throughout the day migrating. Heavens forbid I'm crying and it all ends up like in the inner corner in the form of dark eye goop. And if you've been there like me, you know. And also right now it is like major allergy season. So I'm not looking to live that life. So I would just either take a trusty eyeliner that you know and love, or even a nice stamping eyeshadow brush. Honestly, where was that BK Beauty smudger brush that I just used? This actually could even be like a decent tight liner brush, but just like a small angled brush, whatever you want. I'm going to use a little eyeliner. This is the Waterline pencil from Urban Decay, so I know it's just going to be staying really, really put, and I'm just going to push this into my lash line. So as I'm doing this, this might look like I am lining my upper waterline. I am not. I'm literally getting in between here, like right where the roots of my lashes meet my eyelid. If you've never done this before, it works best with a softer eyeliner that still like dries down, or a bit of powder. Also, for my eye shape, I like to take a little bit and almost like extend the darkness of that lash line right at my inner corner. And that is not necessarily for everybody, but it's just because of my downturned eyes. I like to have a line that goes this way so that this line here doesn't look so low in comparison, if that makes sense. I make one lower here so that this comparison looks a little bit higher. I'm not like exaggerating it, but it's a little bit of like that, like, what were we calling that? It wasn't cat eyes, because that's out here. You know what I'm talking about, like when people were doing a bit more on the inner corner. Anyway, you all probably get what I'm talking about. Now, this is where I would probably put on my mascara, see how I'm feeling, put on the lashes. It's so interesting because at all times, I feel like how I would want to go about this depends on how I'm feeling about doing my makeup. Like right now, I feel like I could probably darken up the outer corner a bit more. I might just do that, just a tiny, tiny pinch. So I'm gonna take that Lara Faye brush, and with just the tiniest bit, I'm going to pop that Abundance shade in the outer corner here. And I am using the lightest pressure, barely anything. It's so funny because Kelly, like, even like a year ago, would think this is actually a fairly light eye look, but I have honestly been wearing virtually, I don't want to say no eye makeup, but like a couple matte shades, or like a very sheer shimmer shade with like a little bit of contour in the crease. So this for me is like a lot for right now. I mean, it's soft, it's balanced, but it's just funny because I'm like, oh yeah, we're definitely wearing some eyeshadow. All right, now I'm gonna go finish the face and we'll talk about this. All right, lovelies, here we have the final look. I'm digging it. I am honestly digging it. I will say, after putting on my concealer, I did decide to go through and I kind of like redid my lash line. I went through and I buffed in some of that lightest shade, that Camel shade. I did that all on the lower lash line below that Voodoo, and then I tapped a bit more Voodoo up closer to the lash line. Just in the process, I kind of forgot that I had stuff on my lower lash line, and when I dabbed a little concealer on, I was like, what is going on here? And I was like, oh yeah, I had shadow. So that was on me, but I just wanted to be honest with that. A couple coats of mascara, and I'm feeling good to go. So I think that honestly, like I said, this is a look that I think that would be great if you are in a wedding, if you're going to a wedding. And I think that, you know, there are lots of things within this palette that would work for many people. So this is sort of my take on it. I hope you enjoyed this. And if you're curious about my tips for what to wear to go to a wedding, as far as like the rest of the face and some more eye tips and some things like that, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss out on that video. That should be coming soon. I am going to film that right now, and then I am probably going to get out of this white shirt before I destroy it. Again, I'm going to take a pause for the rest of the summer on the BYOPs, sort of see how I'm feeling, sort of see how honestly all of you are feeling. If you were like, please don't get rid of the BYOP series, let me know that down below. That will just give me kind of an idea of how many of you are finding this valuable still. We'll see. We'll see what comes when fall gets here, but this was a fun one to sit down and do with all of you. I would be really curious, for those of you that have been married, what did you decide to do for your wedding makeup, and what do you usually do if you're going to a wedding? Let us know down below. Thank you all so much, and I will see you really soon.